Nigeria finds itself staring once again into the mirror of its founding traumas. At 92, former head of state Yakubu Gowon has released his long-awaited memoir, My Life of Duty and Allegiance, a sweeping 881-page defense of the decisions that kept Nigeria united through the horrors of the 1967 to 1970 Civil War. But rather than closing the book on history, it has reopened deep unresolved grievances across the Federation. More than 55 years after Biafra, many ethnic nationalities, Igbos in the southeast, groups in the Niger Delta, Yoruba voices in the southwest, and communities in the Middle Belt continue to argue that the highly centralized Nigerian state, forged and hardened under military rule, has failed to deliver equity, justice, or genuine inclusion. Their calls for self-determination, true federalism, or even outright autonomy grow louder amid persistent feelings of marginalization, resource plunder, and cultural erasure. Gowon insists Nigeria will not fall, but can a federation held together by force of arms and oil revenue truly endure without addressing these simmering demands for restructuring or secession? Tonight, we'll explore the aftermath of Gowon's memoir and the mounting challenges facing a Nigerian federation that many of its own citizens increasingly question. This is the Eastern Eye. I am Alex Obodo. Welcome to the Eastern Eye, a program that X-rays the political, social, and economic developments around us. Joining me tonight is Tony Nnadi. He's the Secretary General of LNC and co-founder of NINAS. Thank you so much, sir.
Not at all. There's nothing other than lies to expect from whatever Yakubu Gowon will write. And the only thing I've done is to watch his interview. I think it was on Arise TV with Chasani Agolo. And he did not disappoint, because you saw the kind of lies he was reeling out at 91. Gowon says that the bullets that they expended in eastern in Biafra were hitting palm trees. So the 3.5 million plus that died were all the imagination, the concoction of those who claim genocide. It's terrible that at this age, the same lies that led to the killings in the first place, the lie that it was an Igbo coup, he emerged the beneficiary from the counter coup that was supposed to be a revenge of that Igbo coup. His co-travelers, his partners in the crime of genocide, have all confessed, to the contrary. We saw when Ibrahim Babangida, launched his autobiography, saying that it was not an Igbo coup. We saw very recently when Obasanjo, said they shouldn't have opened any fight with the Biafrans. I've had the privilege of sitting eyeball to eyeball with the topmost actors in that entire episode on the two sides. There's nobody alive in Nigeria today that could claim to have spent more time in private with Chief Anthony Enohoro discussing these matters. Anthony Enohoro was the spokesman of the federal government of Gowon in that entire, episode of war. From when election of 64 to 65, commotion that became 66 January, and all of how it proceeded to killings and pogroms that went to Aburi before it became a fracturing of the federation by Gowon in May of 1967. Then the declaration on the 30th of May, and then the firing of the first shot at Gake. And, at every point in time, the situation we're going to dedicate most of the time we have today to look around Nigeria and see the connection between those lies. Gowon and people like him have brought us to where we have a country that is built on a foundation of lies and bloodshed, because you will require violence to maintain falsehood. That's how we arrived at 1975, when the same Murtala Mohammed, his partner in that crime of 1966 July, where they began to kill, he killed his commander-in-chief, and began to tell all kinds of tales about not being involved. Which truth have we ever heard from Gowon? You heard in the past where he talked about having malaria. They came back from Aburi. They agreed on everything, signed it, ready to oversign, and then he comes back, and then he begins to tell us that malaria struck him down from making the announcement, from telling the country that was waiting in anxiety what they agreed on in Aburi. He lies that it was malaria, and then he goes from that to lie again about Ojukwu being the one who changed the goalposts. The genocide that the whole world recorded, and in fact, I'm glad to have here. This is an 800-page volume. For the Gowon that is writing 801, this is an 800-page volume that documents the entire 6 years from late 64 throughout 65, throughout 66, 67, 68, 69, all the way to November of 1970. Every day of what transpired across that entire period in all the locations, whether it was the Nigerian side or the Biafran side. This is from the foreign eyewitnesses who recorded unedited, every single thing that transpired on the two sides and then at the international circuit, whether it was at the UN or in OAU, Addis Ababa, wherever, inside Biafra, inside Nigeria, on the war front, and in the backroom, discussions in Vatican and everywhere. So the reason the teaching of history was banished in Nigeria. So we now have people in their 50s and 60s who do not even know the truth. But I can tell them that part of our project was to dig out this truth. And this is from the official historian of the United States on Biafra. That is, the US appointed an agency to monitor everything and record what was going on in the place. And so we have that now. We also have the testimony of the actual, not just participants, the actual principal actors in the entire event. Ojukwu, for instance, who was the one on whose shoulders he fell to manage the eastern region side of matters until he became Biafra to 1970. And so, if we have the testimony of the actual executors, the actual participants on the two sides, if Enohoro shared his experiences and the facts of what transpired with us, if Ojukwu shared with us, if Sisiono shared with us, if Wole Soyinka, who was locked down throughout that war, shared with us, if Ibrahim Bangida confessed, if Obasanjo confessed, Alani Akinrade is still alive. He was the one who everything we say about what's his name, the one they call Scorpion, Adekunle. Alani Akinrade was in that war. I remember by the time we were heading up to what became Nina's eventually, we had finished Pronaco. He was in Nadeko. He was almost killed. He now came into, we finished Pronaco and we now challenged the constitution that came out from Gowon's life, because that's how we came about this charter of death that is bringing Nigeria now to its terminus. That Nigeria that is defined by this constitution is a product of the lies that became genocide. And then the chief executioner, the one who organized the killings from July of 1967, what's his name? Murtala Mohammed, then commissioned in 1975 as victory charter from that war. A constitution, the unitary constitution that took us away from everything we agreed to be in a union. And so I'm just saying that there have been several instances of where Gowon would tell this kind of lie that became the basis of union now, the lie and the bloodshed that followed. That's how we got to where we are. But if we want to know the gravity of what Gowon has done, we only need to look around Nigeria now and see where the blood is flowing and try to ask ourselves, how did we come about this bloodshed? Make a map of Nigeria. Look at where the killings are taking place. Look back 58 years and see who from where did things that resemble what we see now. Let those be slaughtered in Plateau. Let those be slaughtered across the entire Middle Belt. Look back and see what Gowon and Jelban Seni and Danjuma did in eastern Nigeria. It is the blood of the innocent that Nigeria killed and has been denying to date. Nigeria cannot even accept the truth of shedding innocent blood, even when those who did it have come public to say it was a lie that Igbo organized a coup. Ibrahim Babangida is still alive. Obasanjo is still alive. Akinade said if he knew what he knew now, he would not have partaken in fighting the East. So who else do we need to go to ask? The foreigners who witnessed it. I had the privilege of going to the UN at the time we were looking for how to get about this instrument on self-determination. I had the privilege the good luck of finding a relationship that was willing to go to Kofi Annan. At the time, we needed to get ready for enforcing the consensus we had built against the unitary constitution of Nigeria and the alliance of 1967 led by the Fulani, enforcing it against all of us that rendered us slaves in our homeland. Shoyinka, who was locked down throughout that war for trying to get in the middle because there was no basis of going to kill people. He tried to go to settle between the Ojukwu and Gowon of the time, and then Gowon grabbed him and locked him down throughout that war. Shoyinka did not see the war because he tried to stand in the middle. And Gowon, they put a lie on his head that he was spying against them on the side of Ojukwu. These are the kind of lies that we have built our lives on. That is why Nigeria is bleeding now. Those who have been killed in Oyo to look around, see whether there's some role that people from their part of the country played in killing innocent people. It is the blood of the innocent that Gowon and his partners in the crime of genocide. It is the blood of the innocent people they killed to take the oil that has now drowned Nigeria. Gowon said in recent time that it was because of the oil that Nigeria, must take from eastern Nigeria that they had to go to kill the number of people they killed. Adekunle said so too, not only on video, in his memoirs, to say that the claim that the fight was about unity was a lie, that it was a fight that his mandate as a commander in the war front, his mandate was the oil of the East. And Gowon has confessed it recently, that it was because the East will go away with the oil. And what is that East? Other than Igbo. So it is the hatred of those who executed that genocide that they are still denying to this day. They can't even own up, and they're expecting peace. So they built their Nigeria on the basis, on the foundation of falsehood and bloodshed. And that is why Nigeria is the way it is now. Because it was in that setting that they now fractured the part of their lives, whether it was the Euronsi's decree number 34 that took Nigeria away from being a federation. Look at it. The revolution of January 15th happened from middle rank office. The government at the center had collapsed. The government of two regions had collapsed. The top leaders, the political leaders, most of them dead. There was no kind of thing, nothing that would become governance if the head of the army of the time doesn't step forward to hold things together. But they're turning it all around. And again, just before I forget, just yesterday, the cost British Broadcasting Corporation, this BBC that is cost from generation, from centuries back, came out with a documentary to back up the falsehood of Gowon in his autobiography about Biafra. Why will it be the British that turned a little political quarrel into a war because they wanted to seize oil? Why will it be British and a Yoruba collaborator that will tell the story of Biafra? Let the BBC be told very clearly that the blood they shed in eastern Nigeria will avenge itself on the United Kingdom. The Muslim extremists that are now turning the UK into a Sharia territory, it is happening to them, and worse things will happen because they orchestrated genocide in order to take oil. They lied about it, covered it up to date. Unfortunately for them, that Nigeria that has emerged from that brigandage, I owe it a duty to myself and the generation after me, and there are quite a number of us,
all right,
who have committed ourselves to putting that unitary Nigeria to death.
Mr.
That
Nnadi,
unitary Nigeria, defined by this constitution, will have to be put to death.
Mr. Nnadi,
in order to restore life. In order to restore life, I'm not talking about the Federation of Nigeria that died.
Yes, Mr. Nnadi.
If we're discussing the Federation of Nigeria, I tell you, I'll be the first on the construction side.
Great. Mr. Nnadi.
We're not talking about the Federation of Nigeria. We're talking about the Nigeria of master and servant.
Yes.
Defined by this terrible, this.
Mr. Nnadi, we'll take a quick break. Just one thing, because a lot of times when these conversations about what happened, especially during the build-up to the Civil War or around that time, it's always about how the Eastern Nigeria just wanted to secede and go their own way. Something happened at Aburi, and you've also referenced the fact that now Gowon is coming out to say that he had fever at the time. That's the reason why he did not process what was discussed. But he agreed because their host at the time asked them whether you want anything changed. And they all agreed it was fine. They shook hands, drank tea, even had a ride with their host at the time to the airport. So what went wrong with the Aburi Accord and whatever it is that was discussed? And finally, they decided to commence the police action, as it were, because the Civil War started as a police action. The Aburi Accord had a number of things on the table. Nigeria will remain a loose federation. Each region will control its own military forces locally. The central government will not make major decisions without approval of all regional governors, and regions would have greater autonomy over resources and administration. And then, this was on the 4th and 5th of January 1967, but then oil was discovered in the South-South. So was this about oil, really? All this agreement were thrown into the dustbin because of oil?
Oil is central to it, but it wasn't discovered in that period. What happened was that the lying British had concealed the oil, the quantum of oil they were taking away. Nigeria was their possession up till independence. The British sold Nigeria's oil for over 50 years before owning up to Oloibiri because independence was coming. If you doubt me, find out from people who live in Owerri or who are familiar with Owerri whether there's a place called Shell Camp in Owerri. Shell was headquartered, this same Shell that is still here. Shell was headquartered in that Shell Camp, that place called Shell Camp now, for 42 years before going to Port Harcourt in 1960. M.I. Okpara then bought the property of that Shell headquarters facility. That property, to tell you how large it is, if you know where Mod Hotel is in Owerri, from that Mod Hotel all the way to the junction that turns right into Alvadikoko, the university, then the Federal Medical Center next to it, and then all of the police facilities. The government house of Owerri sits in the middle of this vast expanse if you can imagine the size of the compound that was Shell compound that was now split by the government of Eastern when it was a provincial headquarters at the time. Emma Para bought that property from as Shell was relocating to Port Harcourt. So it wasn't in 1966 that they discovered oil. They have been selling the oil, and the approach of independence compelled them to say, "Oh, we have found some small quantity." But it was not until that July of 1966 when Gowon and his partners in crime declared a rebel that the British High Commissioner now had to go, was practically the one that stopped them from seceding, because he whispered to them that the East has so much oil. That was the point at which the British opened the books to show them the quantum of oil. They didn't have any. The eastern region of the time was richer than the federal government. Was the officers from that other side? I mean, those who were running the illicit federal government had declared, because the federation had collapsed, and they continue to operate as a federal government from the time they split the collapsed federation into 12 states, then taking over the assets, the economic assets of the federating region. That's what we are still trying to solve to this date. And so it was oil, essentially, but it was the British and their Fulani friends, joined by the renegade elements from the southwest. I'm choosing my words because we are still in the midst of that quagmire. We are still in the midst of bleeding from every side. We are still in the midst of something that could get far worse than what we saw before if we do not find the common sense to begin to look for answers while we can still find the answers. For those who are preparing to go to election, we are talking about the federation that collapsed and people imposed by brigandage and force, a constitution that now locks us into a unitary union in which Fulani, we saw when the U.S. hearing on Nigeria was taking place in February this year, that it talks about what kind of constitution is it that allows the Fulani to roam freely with AK-47. For those while the people who they are killing do not have access to any weapons. It is this inverted federation that Gowon and Co. imposed on all of us that has brought us to where the Fulani, coming from 16 different countries, according to the account of El Rufai, who went to give them money while he was governor in Kaduna. And so these people are an organized army. From the days of Uthman Danfodio to the Ahmadu Bello that said that the Nigeria should be an estate of their great-grandfather. I'm trying to tell us the backdrop to what became war and what we are still trying to solve to this day. It is the Fulani conquest agenda supported by the British that brought us into this unitary arrangement, because they had to now enforce it. Remember how Ahmadu Bello had crafted his battle script, his mission statement, in which he was telling them that the new nation called Nigeria must be an estate of their great-grandfather, Uthman Danfodio, and that on no account should there be a change of power, that they have to ruthlessly prevent it, and that they will have to use, the minorities of the North as willing tools, that is the characters like Yakubu Gowon, characters like the Theophilus Danjuma. The Danjuma that gave 3 billion naira to Gowon the other day, that is Gowon's share of the blood money they made from shedding innocent blood. That is Gowon's share of because he was dislodged in 1975 by Murtala Mohammed. So he wasn't here when they began to share Nigeria's commonwealth among themselves. So the portion that Danjuma got, that's from where he could find 3 billion to give to the head of the gang, but who continued to pretend he wasn't involved in anything. And so that question of what went wrong in Aburi, it was a clear, orchestration of genocide in order to take over the oil. And the British sat at the top of it. Their local enforcers, the Fulani, and the Alliance of 1967. I'm sure you remember the map of the dot in circle. The map, I'm sure you can find it if you look around for it. The map that, at least I want it on display so that those listening can see why Nigeria is dying right now. If you show that map and the dot in circle it shows, you will see the alliance of the rest of Nigeria that decided to commit genocide against the Igbo, which they've not owned up to this date, and imposing as a charter of victory from that war of genocide, a constitution that permanently excludes the Igbo from the management of Nigeria, that permanently subjugates the Igbo in all things, that permanently locks the Igbo, landlocks the Igbo. Not because they changed anything in geography, but because they cut Eastern region into three. The entire, part aborting the Atlantic Ocean became River State. The entire part aborting the Cameroonian border became Southeastern State. That Southeastern State is today's Cross River and Akwa Ibom. That River State of 1967 is today's Rivers and Bayelsa. Then the hinterland, they call East Central State, is what they've now carved into 5 Southeast states, the so-called Southeast. I don't want to hear about Southeast because it is their own creation to fracture the Igbo and lock them into a situation where they cannot raise any issue in the decision-making process, anything in Nigeria.
All right.
But look around Nigeria and tell me who else is building that Nigeria. Tell me how many Yoruba people are building in Enugu and Kano. Tell me how many Fulani people are developing other parts. The Igbo believed in Nigeria so much that they settle wherever they go, begin to develop wherever they are. But look at the treatment Nigeria is giving to them. But unfortunately for that Nigeria, very, very unfortunately for that Nigeria, the title deed by which the union is held together is this forgery they call the 1999 Constitution, which claimed falsely that we submitted our sovereignty into the union to be managed the way they scripted in their conquest document. And so, since it is my signature that will have to sustain that fraud, we have organized the victims of Unitary Nigeria. We are now a majority. It doesn't matter the quantum of noise that anybody may want to bring to it, to take down that constitution and end the union that is anchored on it. Those who place premium on the value of life, those who hold life sacrosanct, that is, those who agree on sanctity of life, those who agree on equality of men, will go to another meeting to discuss what kind of union they may want to have. And that is if they want. Otherwise, by virtue of this instrument from the UN, which I was privileged to be part of how it came in 2007, I can assure you that the Union of Nigeria is, as we speak, at an end.
All right.
Because by the time they were heading to election in 2023, remember,
yes,
we did tell them that
Mr. Nnadi,
there's really no Nigeria to govern now.
My name is Alex Obodo. In continuing the conversation, let's take a look at what the indigenous nationalities will need to do, because we've had this conversation for quite some time. What needs to be done at this point? And I ask again, are the people in power aware that the indigenous nationalities are actually the real owners of the country and not those at the helm, as it were? Help us put that in perspective, and also going back to the talk about dot in a circle. I think we'll have that map now.
Yes. The people in Abuja now pretending to be government. There was an election in 2023. We saw how that election went. If anybody is still in doubt whether P2B, whether or not P2B won the election, they can continue. But we saw that the Supreme Court abandoned the constitution that required two-thirds majority, 25% in two-thirds of the states, which is 24 states, and the Federal Capital Territory. The provision was so clear. I remember on behalf of NINAS, we made a broadcast before the matter went to the Supreme Court, when the Court of Appeal was now dancing to the beat of INEC. I remember going out there as a lawyer who knows exactly what is written, who is in a position to address the justices of the Supreme Court, to be careful so that they don't create a bigger problem than the one they were trying to solve. We told them that there were 3 grounds upon which what INEC did in that election should not be allowed to stand. The first is the constitutional ground, in which the requirement for 25% in at least two-thirds, which is 24 states, and the Federal Capital Territory. That's a separate requirement from the 24 states. We told the Supreme Court that if they will abandon that provision, at a time we were targeting the demise of that constitution, the crashing of that constitution, that we will join them to make sure that the constitution is killed on the streets. There's also the ground of law, in which the INEC that set the regulations about how they will conduct the election abandoned those regulations on the day of election. Whereas at law, if an agency is empowered by law to do some business on behalf of government, any regulations made pursuant to that law becomes a part of that law.
Mr. Nnadi was actually trying to make a point before we lost that connection. Please do kindly continue with that point you were making, Mr. Nnadi. My apologies for that break.
Yeah. So very quickly, I'm saying that where we are now, because there's still this noise of 2027 election mandated by this same constitution of death, and people actually preparing to go to renew the life of that constitution at a time, everybody who cares about the peoples of Nigeria, because there's Nigeria, the entity. There are also the peoples of Nigeria trapped in that entity. And so Nina's concern now is about the 250 million people trapped in the sinking ship of the Nigerian state. We had the opportunity to save both the Nigerian state and the people of Nigeria at the time we went to Aburi. Since after Aburi, this is 59 years. We have every day of this 59 years to save the two by going to rework our union to a union of life instead of a union of death that has been for a majority. Initially, people thought it was going to be only the Igbo that would be killed. If you were to show us that map, so that those who are listening can see the kind of calamity and atrocity we are talking about. Yes, that we can use this. The portion in color is the 5 so-called Southeast states. You will see that the reason Buhari called it dot in circle was that they shut out the borders, the international borders, the entire Cross River, Akwa Ibom, you could see aborts Cameroon, the entire rivers and Bayelsa above the Atlantic Ocean. It was to reduce the land size and landlock that portion into not having access, so that they could encircle the place 360 degrees and kill off those who were there, or those the Igbo of the hinterland. Meanwhile, if anybody is stupid enough to join Amechi in Port Harcourt to say he's no longer Igbo, if anybody is stupid enough to join Okowa in Asaba to say he's no longer Igbo, then that is that's their headache. But the day, if anybody was stupid enough to join Emefiele and Kachiku Ibe that was in NNPC or wherever the oil ministry of the time of Buhari, if anybody was stupid enough to agree with them that they were no longer able, we'll only say good luck to all of you. But the day the Igbo will be killed, they will be killed. Look back at what happened in Asaba massacre. They came to welcome the Nigerian troops, singing One Nigeria. But Nigeria, Murtala Mohammed and co. were not seeing anything other than the Igbo they came to kill. Emefiele is where he is today on account of being Igbo. He did all the atrocities with Buhari. But why was Buhari left? And Emefiele being treated the way he's being treated? That is the way it will be for Wike the day they will turn against Wike. That is the day he will realize it's Igbo. Amechi, the one that wants to go to contact, and whether he's lost out now in the stupidity of going to election, that shouldn't be. What I was saying before the connection was lost is that we can dress back and tell ourselves the truth that the Constitution imposed as victory charter from the genocidal war between Biafra and Nigeria or Eastern region can no longer be tolerated as basis of union. Those who have been swearing to defend and uphold that constitution since 1999 have been committing treason against all of the rest of us. It is on account of that constitution that we are living in the corruption that is widening. It's on account of that constitution that we don't have electricity. It's on account of that constitution that the killings that are happening now, and that is an emergency, part of the entire large problem. The reason people are being slaughtered all over the Nigeria of today is that arms and ammunition are on the exclusive list of that constitution, and there are 68 such items. The reason elections have been going the way they've been going, including the one of 2023, is because elections are on that exclusive list, so that there's an INEC sitting in Abuja to decide what happens in Yenagua and what happens in Karanamoda. In a federation, it should not be so. It's on account of that constitution that we have this misery that young people are running away from Nigeria because what is it that will keep them here? They can't find employment. How will you get employment if there's no electricity to generate that employment? And you were asking me whether the people in government are aware of what we are saying. Tinubu became governor of Lagos from the midst of Nadeko. There's nothing I will say now. There's nothing I've said concerning this matter that Tinubu is not aware of. There's nothing to explain to him anymore concerning the matter. Abiola laid down his life because he said he will not govern for one day. That was what became Nadeko. Abiola said he will not govern for one day with the constitution that Murtala Mohammed and his confederates imposed on us in 1975. That was what consumed Abiola's life. On June 12th now, they will all jump out and begin to wave a Nadeko flag all over the place as people who are pursuing democracy on behalf of everybody. Bola Tinubu knows that the Nigeria of unitary, because what was the problem with Obasanjo when Obasanjo had to seize the council funds? Because Tinubu was standing with Pronaco for what we were doing, Enoro and the rest of us who decided to call a meeting of the owners of Nigeria when Obasanjo refused, we approached Obasanjo. I spent 4 years trying to guide Obasanjo to solve this problem. He refused. Then we went to the owners of the sovereignty, and we were lucky to have them turn up in what we then called Pronaco, 2005, 2006. By the time we announced in 2004, after waiting for Obasanjo into the 5th year from 1999, by the time we announced that we were going to call a meeting of the owners of the sovereign to decide what they want to do with their union that was dying, Obasanjo went on national TV to say it will amount to treason. Of course, we have to defy him. He's alive. Let those who can find him ask him what transpired between us. So Obasanjo knew. The Yar'Adua that took over from Obasanjo sent Bola Tinubu after he was sworn in. After Yar'Adua was sworn in, we had gone to court the week before, 23rd of May in 2007, to say that the Constitution of Nigeria was a fraud that could no longer be basis of union. Binta Nyako took the file after the swearing in because the husband had to be sworn in. She had traveled. Binta took that file to the Chief Justice of Federation, White, who then took her to Yar'Adua. Yar'Adua sent Bola Tinubu to come to plead with us with 5 ministerial slots. Bola Tinubu is still alive. Let anybody who can find him, I'm sure he's watching this program, let everybody ask him whether Yar'Adua, Umaru Yar'Adua, did not send him, Bola Tinubu, to Enoro and Pronaco to invite us to come to join the government. He offered some ministerial slots, ambassadorial positions. We began to learn about all of that later, so that we could solve this problem. Of course, we told them that it's not something of coming to join the government. Let us agree, let the announcement be made, so that we leave the matter of 4 years mandate and go and solve this problem. They wanted to be in power. Of course, Yar'Adua was ill. The matter didn't go anywhere because he was ill. So at no point was Tinubu a stranger to what, because when Obasanjo then, before he finished his tenure in 2007, when Obasanjo seized the council fund, it was because Tinubu was insisting on Nigeria going back to what a federation should be, that Lagos State should be able to do XYZ. And Obasanjo said it could not be so. We stood with Tinubu. Some of the enmities we incurred in that period are still subsisting because he stood with him. And then he maneuvers and lands us into this mess of bringing Buhari to come and be president. Let those who know where to find Boubacar Galadima find out from him whether he was not part of the team that came with Buhari talking about people in government. So this Obasanjo knows. The Yar'Adua that came after him knows. The Jonathan that came after the Yar'Adua, of course, took his time to listen and put his life on the line to solve this problem when he called the conference of 2014. I'm not telling you what somebody told me, I'm telling you what transpired eyeball to eyeball with all these persons I've named. And so, we have carried on as if we no longer understand what is being said. But the owners of the sovereignty are not going to wait and die, wait until the Fulani have killed every one of them. Are we still there?
Yeah. I mean, we're actually out of time, and it's been a very illuminating conversation with you, Tony Nnadi, and lots of things are now brought into the fore. Of course, it's an ongoing conversation as always. We'll bring you once in a while here to throw light on the importance of negotiating the federation with the real owners of Nigeria, as you put it. Thank you so much.
Just before I go,
yes.
What we recommend is that we suspend this journey to this election and go and solve this problem. If we don't, and we may have only the top quarter of 2026 to do so before it becomes something we can no longer do, Fulani will come to everybody where they are, as long as this constitution is standing. But if we want to save the people, let us suspend this election and go and solve this problem. That would be where I'll stop.
All right, then. Tony Nnadi, Secretary General, LNC, that's the Lower Niger Congress, and co-founder of NINAS. Thank you so much for your insights on the program tonight. And that's the Eastern Eye for tonight. Do join us tomorrow for another episode of the program. My name is Alex Obodo. Good night.